South Korea in crisis, the demographic collapse that could change everything. South Korea faces an alarming crisis that could redefine its future. Although this may seem like an extreme statement, the country is approaching a critical situation on multiple fronts: demographic, economic, social, cultural, and military. If current trends continue, by 2060, the South Korea we know could be a remnant of the past. What exactly does this impending collapse mean? And why is it becoming increasingly difficult to stop? The real population bomb. To maintain a stable population, a fertility rate of about 2.1 children per woman is necessary. In the 1950s, it was common for South Korean families to have an average of 6 children. However, by the 1980s, that rate had already dropped to below 2. We arrived at 2023 with an alarming rate of only 0.72 children per woman, the lowest ever recorded. In Seoul, that number is even more staggering, around 0.55. It is estimated that about half of the women in South Korea will not have children, while the other half will have only one. What do these numbers translate to in practice? If the fertility rate continues in this direction, out of every 100 South Koreans, only 36 will have children. This dynamic will intensify in the coming generations. When these children grow up, they will have about 13 children, who in turn will have only 5. In a projection over 4 generations, we could go from 100 South Koreans to merely 5. The current age pyramid clearly reveals this reality. There's only one 1-year-old for every 4 50-year-olds. After 40 years below the replacement level, the consequences, while not visible in the present, are rapidly approaching. At the moment, South Korea's population is at a historic high, as is its workforce and GDP, which are still on the rise. However, the demographic crisis is about to hit the nation like an out-of-control train. The future is uncertain, and let's fast forward 35 years to see the landscape in 2060. The most referenced demographic projections are compiled by the UN, presenting 3 possible scenarios: low, medium, and high fertility. Historically, the medium forecasts for South Korea have been overly optimistic. Between 2022 and 2023, the fertility rate fell another 8%, leading us to adopt the most pessimistic scenario, which has proven to be more realistic in recent years. Still, it is essential to keep in mind that these are projections, and the future is an unknown. The pyramid in 2060. By 2060, South Korea's population pyramid will reveal a grim landscape. The population will have decreased by an impressive 30%, resulting in the loss of 16 million South Koreans in just 35 years. It will likely be the oldest nation in history, with 1 in every 2 citizens over the age of 65. Less than 10% of the population will be under 25, and only 1% will consist of small children. Imagine waking up in a country where the streets are eerily quiet, devoid of children playing. Entire cities could be left behind, abandoned. Half the population will consist of elderly individuals living alone or in overcrowded nursing homes. A small group of people will be struggling to keep society functioning, facing direct and significant consequences. The economic collapse. In 2023, about 40% of Koreans over 65 were living below the poverty line, but this number may seem optimistic compared to 2060. Currently, South Korea has one of the largest pension funds in the world, valued at approximately $730 billion. However, experts predict that this fund will stop growing in the 2040s and could be completely depleted by the 2050s. By 2060, the responsibility for sustaining pensions will fall on the working population. To function effectively, pension systems typically require between 2 to 3 workers for each retiree. However, even if all South Koreans over 15 are employed, the reality will show a ratio of less than 1 worker per elderly person. In the face of this situation, workers will be unable to bear the rising costs. Poverty among the elderly will become a common reality, and many will find themselves forced to stay in the labor market. However, the South Korean economy may already have collapsed by then. The workforce, currently consisting of about 37 million people generating a GDP of approximately $1.7 trillion, could drop to about 17 million by 2060. Although technological advancements can increase productivity, the overall impact is that South Korea's GDP may peak in the 2040s. This indicates a real risk of a permanent economic recession. It is important to highlight that science, technology, and innovation, areas where significant advances are usually made, are driven by young adults and middle-aged individuals. The scarcity of young labor would mean significantly reduced tax revenue for the government, which will be pressured to address the needs of half the population that is elderly while seeing its own income decline. As a result, cuts in essential services such as healthcare and social assistance may be necessary. As infrastructure concentrates in urban areas, smaller communities may be neglected, and there will be no resources available for future investments, creating a vicious cycle. Social and cultural collapse. The prospects for South Korean society and culture are also grim. Predicting how societies might develop is challenging, but some trends are undeniable. Today, about 20% of South Koreans live alone, and another 20% claim to have no close friends or relatives. By 2060, 50% of the population aged 70 will have no siblings, and 30% will have no children. Young adults aged 25 to 35 will make up only 5% of the population, and in most cases, will have no siblings. This dynamic will leave the elderly without close family support and young adults without significant social ties, especially outside the metropolises, creating a scenario conducive to a strong epidemic of loneliness. Furthermore, South Korean culture may suffer a substantially negative impact. In 2000, there were 17.5 million South Koreans aged 25 to 45, representing 37% of the population. And this was the generation that brought forth K-pop, K-drama, and various trends that conquered the world. However, by 2060, only 5.6 million will be in that age group, representing 16% of the population. Many cultural traditions face difficulties, as older generations struggle to find young people willing to learn and preserve these legacies. The disappearance of young people could result in the extinction of many of these traditions, causing South Korean culture to lose its essence. For the individual, growing up in 2060 may be a singular experience in a country where universities and schools are closed due to lack of enrollment. What will remain for the youth in terms of job opportunities and the political landscape? The desire to be part of a vibrant society may lead young people to concentrate in Seoul or emigrate abroad, leaving rural areas to become ghost towns. This phenomenon is not new. Japan already counts nearly 10 million abandoned homes in its rural areas. Regarding security, we must consider that South Korea and North Korea are technically in conflict, and this situation may persist until 2060, creating uncertainties regarding the country's ability to maintain a military presence. Today, only 5% of men of military age are enlisted, and in 2060, that number would need to grow to 15%, just to maintain current levels. The dilemma of return. The main challenge is that once the demographic issue reaches a crisis point, reversing that reality becomes extremely difficult. Assuming fertility in South Korea tripled, reaching the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman, the population pyramid would still be inverted in 2060. The ratio of only 1.5 working-age individuals for each elderly person over 65 clearly indicates that the country will have to undergo a significant demographic bottleneck before any recovery. However, we should not lose hope. Although the situation is critical, there is the possibility of long-term recovery, provided that South Korea promotes social and cultural changes that encourage childbirth. In 2024, there was a 3% increase in births, the first growth in 9 years. For this trend to continue, it is essential for the country to confront the challenges that brought it to this situation. This demographic collapse is not just a distant concept, it is already underway. Other nations such as China with a rate of 1, Italy and Spain with rates of 1.2, Germany with 1.4, and the UK and the US both with 1.6 also face similar issues. Although these rates may seem better at first glance, they still result in a significant population decline over generations. Unfortunately, most public discussions about the low birth rate focus on labor shortage levels, overlooking the existential threat this poses to contemporary societies. If we do not take immediate and effective measures and do not change the social structure that discourages family formation, the near future could be bleak for all of us. The demographic train does not stop, and now is the time to recognize that it is approaching, demanding urgent action before it is too late.